Hey everybody, this is Heidi, and you're listening to the Successful Fashion Designer Podcast. We all know that the fashion industry is brutally competitive and it takes loads of hard work to get ahead. The problem is that everyone's secretive and tight-lipped about their ways. After working as a designer and educator for over a decade, I wanted to help break down those barriers and bring you valuable knowledge from industry experts, and this show is exactly where you'll find that. Whether you're trying to break into the fashion world, make yourself more marketable, launch your own label, or become a successful freelancer, we'll help you get ahead in the cutthroat fashion industry. This is episode 65 of the Successful Fashion Designer Podcast, and today I'm chatting with Nadia Ricketts. Nadia runs a business called Beatwoven, and what she does is so cool. She takes sound wave files from songs and converts them into repeating patterns and converts them into textiles. It is a really amazing creative process that she has been building very slowly, very meticulously, and very passionately over the past almost decade. It started out as a project in college and slowly morphed into a full-time business and gig. I love all of the stuff Nadia talks about in this episode. In particular, she really shares her journey in a transparent way, and she shares that it did not happen overnight. There were years where she, struggled or fought through various copyright issues with lawyers and really had to battle to get this thing off the ground. So for anyone out there thinking that this is an overnight success, you can look at her online or on Instagram and it looks like everything is just great, but she is behind the scenes working so hard. And she shares about how she kind of, keeps her head above water and how she keeps pedaling through all of the trials and tribulations that it takes to run a brand. She talks about some great and amazing partnerships she's been able to build with big companies to help gain more exposure, and all the things that she's done to build and grow her business over the years. So I know you guys are all going to love this, and if you have any interest in or are working on your own brand, this is definitely a must-listen episode. If you think someone else out there, if you have a friend out there, an industry contact that you think would enjoy this episode, do them a favor and send it to them. Stop the episode right now and send them a quick text or email and let them know, hey, I've been listening to this podcast called The Successful Fashion Designer. I think you would enjoy it. Here's a great episode for you to listen to. I know they will appreciate it. I appreciate it. It's the best thing you can do to help spread the word about the podcast and get this content out to more listeners out there. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your help in sharing this. Now, on to the interview with Nadia. As always, to access the show notes for today's episode, visit sfdnetwork.com/65. Welcome, Nadia, to the Successful Fashion Designer Podcast. Can you start out with a quick introduction of who you are and what you do in the fashion/textile/artistic industry? I'll let you talk about it, how you want to talk about it.
My name's Nadia, and I would class myself, I suppose, as a woven textile artist. And what I'm doing here in London, I suppose, is I'm really interested in the idea of unseen patterns, especially those with sound. What I'm trying to do here is, by using technology tools or digital technology, is to be able to play with something like sound, something that's intangible and ethereal, and to be able to create patterns from it, which then can fuse with the textiles world, which is also pattern. And I'm really interested in how that then becomes a part of an interior space, or could then be a fabric that you could potentially wear. And when I started out, it was very much about music. So because I'm a massive music lover myself, and my whole career actually was in music. I've had many of those moments where I've been on the dance floor and had the most amazing time and those special times of my life. But also those sort of songs that you hear that you love so much, you just can't play enough, and you feel like you want to grab it or touch it or hold on to it, but it's just, there's nothing there to sort of materialize, I suppose. So I thought it'd be really nice to be able to create something tangible and from music and allow it to come into our lives in a physical way, but in a beautiful way at the same time, so we can allow it to become part of our design world and part of our surroundings. So that's what I'm doing at the moment in London. It's quite experimental and it's evolving always. So yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Okay, so I mean, it's a very visual thing, so I'll definitely show a bunch of pictures in the show notes, and everybody listening, you should check out Nadia's site, which will be linked in the show notes, because you really kind of have to see it firsthand. But to kind of explain it, if hopefully I don't do too bad of a job, but you essentially are taking like the sound waves and then turning them into woven patterns in repeat, and they're being woven into textiles, more or less.
Yeah.
I
mean, more or less. So we're looking at the idea of a sound wave as being a type of visual form of sound. But when I looked at a sound wave, sound waves can be really ugly, I think. That's my personal opinion. And when I was at university studying to be a designer, I sort of thought, well, how can we make it look good? And after I spoke to coders and music producers that were very much interested in visualizing sound, we started looking at the idea of sort of zooming into a sound wave with a magnifying glass, like what patterns would be happening within that sound wave. So in a way, like when you zoom in to a normal photograph, you're zooming in and seeing all the pixels that are happening within it to make it the final image. That's kind of what we're doing with Beatwoven. We're looking at all the pixels inside it to see all the patterns that you don't see. So it's kind of the idea of a sound wave, but looking at it in a more intricate detail. And when you play the music in the software, you could actually every sound that you see, every sound that you can hear, you can see playing. It's quite hypnotic.
That's really cool. So so you made a comment when you were in design school at university. So did you go to fashion school?
I went to, it was textiles. Degree in textiles. So okay. Yeah. But it was Central St. Martin's, which is a fashion school. It's art and fashion, I suppose.
Yeah, Central St. Martin's. I think probably a lot of the listeners have heard of that. So it sounds like it started there, but you did a lot of collaboration with, like you said, coders and software engineers and musicians. And did I read right on your website? You guys created like a proprietary or some type of software that was the first software of its kind to sort of do what you're doing?
Yeah. So I was the visual person, and I was the concept person. So I already understood about music being passion, and I was also studying weaving, and I understood that music was very mathematical, and there was a science behind it. So it's not necessarily about what you hear. It's the sounds, the sequence of the sounds that are created within the music. There's a lot of science behind it, and weaving is very structural and scientific and mathematical as well. And I used to find that when I was threading my loom up, I was counting in the same counts as what I would do when I was learning a dance routine to music, and the numbers were the same. So I was like, oh, this is really strange, So I was sort of the conceptual person, and I was also sort of the visual person. And I worked with a coder then to know how we could build a software that would work, that would link directly with weaving, and sort of dissecting the process of digital weaving and weaving to design this software that was sort of first of its kind, really. It's quite basic really now, but this was back in 2008, so back then it was quite something different.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So this all started about a decade ago, and so you've done like
Mm.
quite a bit since then. I have a couple like kind of specific granular questions for those textile and sort of fashion nerds out there listening. I'm really curious to know, like, where do you look at the repeat happening? Are you taking like a snippet of the chorus, or do you just kind of go visually, or like where and how do you kind of decide where the repeat is from the visual you get
Yeah.
from the sound wave into the textile?
Yeah. So some of them are literal. Some of them are. I've done a whole song that was like 5.5 meters long. But
Oh, wow.
yeah, I mean, it really depends on the project, really, because I have worked with projects where the client has wanted a particular part of the song, so we stuck with that. And then, yeah, that's more of a literal pattern. But then I'm really interested in that idea of playing with the pattern and repeating it, as you said. So I would look at it as a visual form, really, and then dissect out the interesting visual parts within it to create interesting repeat patterns that I think will visually look good. Usually they come from the chorus. It's just usually the way it is. But, you know, or sometimes it will be a specific, if there's a certain lyric in the song, or there's a part of the song that's sort of renowned for being the best part of the song and it looks good, then I would use that part as well. And it just really depends on the actual patterns that are being created, with where I decide how to create the repeats. So it goes from being sort of audio, and some of them go from audio to being very visual, and how I could make it look good for an interior, for a design application.
Yeah.
Because we want it to look good, don't we? If it's going to be something we wear or something we have in our home or something like that.
Yeah.
I suppose that's what my job is, really.
Is to take this song and turn it into a sound wave and then figure out how to kind of like chop it up and repeat it so it's aesthetically pleasing but also has this really cool connection to the original song.
Yeah. I mean, I don't change any of so all of the proportions have to stay the same, because if I dissect, if I just proportionately scale, or if I change any of the actual squares in any way, then in essence I'm changing the sound. So I can't do that. I'm very strict with that, because it's all. Otherwise, it would just sort of defeat what I'm trying to do. So I'm quite strict with making sure that proportionally everything is the same. It's just how you can use sections in repeat to make other patterns.
Yeah. And what's your process for picking colors? I know on your website you've got quite a few pictures, with Pantone books and swatches and stuff. And so, how do you go about that? Does that have some connection to the original song, like maybe a color feeling you get? Or are you really looking at that just from a pure design perspective?
Yeah, so again, it depends on the project. But if I was creating designs, what I would call coming from me for my collection, or doing something quite bespoke that was quite freely my own choice, then what I would do is I would play the music or the sound over and over and over and over and over again. I'd probably do it for a few days so that I really start to get a feeling for the music or for the sound, and then I just get a sense of texture and color and how that sound or piece of music makes me feel, how I would then interpret that into color and texture. So I will then go in, and then I'll get a feel for it. I'll go and look through on the catwalk. I will look at architecture. I will look at interiors. I will look at different textile textures, like anything that I think visually could like interpret what I'm feeling, and then pull like a mood board together. And then that helps me get a bit of more of a structured feeling for the color and the texture. And then I'll just eventually narrow it down until I feel like the selection that I've made is the right choice. But so it's a very personal thing to me. But I kind of realized actually from by accident, from discovering sort of Beatwoven when I was at university, I went in to study something called Synesthesia, which is, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's a condition that people have when they hear sounds or music, they see colours, and different notes associated with different colours. And I sort of always had something where I could hear things and I would see visual images or get a sense of, get a bit of a feeling for a sound or a piece of music. And I suppose my way of expressing that is through textiles, is through texture in colour. And because I trained as a dancer originally, I've danced since I was really small, and I suppose that was my way then of expressing music, but like through movement.
Yeah.
Whereas now I've gone into a way of expressing it through textiles.
Yeah.
I suppose.
Does it ever make you crazy listening to the same song for a couple of days? I've done that experiment before where people say like, oh, if you listen to one song on... No, seriously. It's like if you listen to one song on repeat, you're supposed to be like super, super productive. And I tried it and it made me totally crazy. I couldn't do it. I did it for like 3 hours and I was like, this is too much.
No, I've never had that problem. I mean, I listen to it again and again and again, and then I put it to one side.
Yeah.
And then it would be usually on my iPhone when I'm getting, like, walking down the road or getting on the tube or getting on the train. And then I would listen to it when I'm going for a run or something like that. And then, luckily enough, I haven't had a song yet.
Okay.
That I haven't really not liked. I like all different types of music. So. Yeah. I haven't had anything that's got on my nerves just yet, but you never know.
Yeah. Okay. I hope I didn't just plant that seed. Sorry.
Yeah. It's fine.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the production of the textiles? I know you guys do all your weaving at one of the last remaining English silk weaving mills in the UK. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about like the importance of that to you and how that all got started?
Yeah, so one of my main things as well is quality. So I really want the product or the fabrics to be beautifully made. I just want them to be really special, because I think being able to weave music into fabric is a pretty special thing, and I want them to sort of represent that idea and I want them to make people feel really good in their lives, you know, whether it's them having them in their homes or wearing these fabrics. So craftsmanship and quality has been really, really important to me. And one of the mills that we're working with is based in a little town in Sudbury. It's really cute, and that's sort of in, where is that, southeast of the UK, and it's been going since 1740.
Wow.
Which I only realised when I was given a presentation in front of a group of Americans, and one of them said, that's older than the United States of America. I was like, wow, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
He was like, that's pretty impressive. So the craftsmanship in this mill is just unbelievable. So, you know, it's got through every single challenge so far that's ever been thrown. So it's pretty impressive. That it's still going. And they've been great. They've been working with me from the very start. And from the very start, I was, you know, it was more of an experiment, as really playing with the patterns and structures and finding out what was working and what wasn't working, and scale and different yarns that you could use. And I knew what I wanted it to look like. It wasn't quite coming out how I wanted it to look like. So there was like lots of toing and froing for quite a while, and they were really patient with me. So I do all the designing and the colours, and I know exactly what structures, you know, I use and everything. So I do everything here, and then they literally just make it with me for me. I usually source my own yarns as well, and they make it because they have amazing jacquard looms, and the only way that the software works is if it's paired with a jacquard loom. It's been designed for a jacquard rather than a hand loom. So yeah, they weave for Alexander McQueen, Burberry, and And you go there, and it's like you want to spend all day there. And you have an archive library, and it's just like hundreds of years of books, of archive patterns, and you can see like how they used to design fabrics 200 years ago. It was all there's no such thing as computers. Everything was all hand drawn, and the intricacy of the drawings, and how they used to paint everything by hand, all the different colours. So you can really see the change from analog to digital. And they have every single design they have a log in their archive for.
And a lot of those designs are older than the United States itself. Oh, that is so cool. I bet it's like just such a magical experience even walking into that building.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that's really cool. So you've mentioned a couple times that it really started out as like an experimental thing when you were at university. Here we are 10 years later. I know you've done some really awesome partnerships with like ABC Carpet and Home in New York City, which one of my favorite stores. I used to live not too far from there, and it is such a fabulous place. And you have partnered with them and are doing some throw pillows and stuff. And so can you talk a little bit about how you took this thing that started out as like a university experimental project and have now kind of commercialized it and turned it into a biz? I mean, here we are 10 years later and you're running full force with this thing. Can you talk a little bit about like what that transition was like and what you did and how you grew everything?
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea came to me, as I said, in 2008. And I graduated with the project in 2009. And I kind of knew when the idea it struck me like a lightning bolt. I kind of knew it was something that had legs, but I didn't quite realise what they were. So when I graduated, I actually worked in fashion for a couple of years as a designer.
Okay.
For Arcadia Group, so high street fashion, Arcadia Group. I don't know if you know them. They own Topshop.
Yep.
A lot of the high street stores. But actually those 2 years of not working with Beatwoven was a really good thing because it gave me a time for reflection, and also it gave me experience working within fashion to really see that I could see a really good gap for new and exciting ideas when it came to fabrics, woven fabrics especially, and pattern. And I can remember at those times it was like Balmain. Balmain had just launched, and he was doing these amazing catwalk shows with like metallic sort of tailored suits and these amazing sort of Baroque patterns. And I was like, I could really imagine my fabrics on the catwalk,
Yeah.
And I was, people were like approaching me to do exhibitions and do panel talks about my work, and I was being contacted by journalists and all these things. And I was sort of taken aback by it really because I didn't have a lot of experience. I just sort of went with it.
Yeah, where were all these where were all these opportunities coming? Like, were they just finding your website, or like how are you getting all this contact?
So through university, actually.
Oh, okay.
So through Central St Martin's, they're really pretty amazing with alumni that have just graduated. And I think if you work, because I worked really, really hard, and they could see how hard I worked, but I'd also had something that was of interest, then they'd be contacted by people, and then they would recommend. So they were recommending me. My weave tutor, Philippa Brock, she's amazing. She was emailing me and recommending me, and so I was being contacted by all these different people.
Okay.
So
I'm like, most people would kill for these. Most people would kill for these opportunities, and you're like, they just started happening.
Yeah, they just started.
Yeah.
And then one of the main exhibitions we did, it was a collaborative exhibition at the V&A with St Martin's, and after that I thought, I really want to do this. I think there's something here. And then in 2012, because we were in a recession, in 2012 I was made redundant at work one day, and I thought, so then I was like, I need to either find another job or start up Beatwoven as my practice. So I applied for this opportunity. It was something called the Cloth Workers Foundation Award. It's a guild that's been going in the UK since the 1100s, supporting fabric and cloth making in the UK. and they support weavers trying to start out, and they were offering to buy the equipment and offer a studio space and give like business support to 6 weavers. And I applied for that, and I managed to get that. So
Wow.
that basically started me off.
Yeah.
And it was really great because it was partnered with an organisation called the Cockpit Arts in London, which is a designer maker incubator, and they take craftspeople with good ideas and with good practices to help support them while they start up a business, because they understand that it's really hard in the first 5 years, especially if it's a creative one and it's a craft. So they kind of hold your hand and help you with things like finance and taxes and business planning and raising finance. And one of the main things for me was I had no money. Literally, I was in big debt. I didn't have any money at all. So I had to raise the money myself to get going, which took, a few years. And I just applied for funding and awards, and slowly and surely just kind of got me going. And I then did a big 2-year research and development project, researching with my own lawyer through an award. I was working with my own legal research lawyer on the question of using copyrighted music and how I could take sound wave patterns that are directly linked to music and then put them into the re-commercialize them and put them into the marketplace. Where the boundaries lie between copyrights and trademarks and stuff. So it was a really boring time, but I'm really glad that I did it. And then once I sort of had researched that area, I then had the confidence to take it to market. So I didn't go to market until 2014.
Okay.
So it was a lot bubbling under the surface.
So
background research.
Yeah. And that's so interesting because I didn't even think about the copyright part of it. But can you talk a little bit about what you found out? I mean, clearly something's okay to do. How much do you have to distort it?
Yeah. It's seriously like a grey area. And what I realised is, from the journey is that what's happening with technology back then, it's evolved a hell of a lot more now, but in 2012, was you were finding people that were coming across these new ideas through technology, and it was actually affecting licensing laws and legal side of things. So what comes with new ideas and technology actually helps push boundaries in the legal sense as well. And it's basically, I mean, a lot of the work actually is still quite far removed from it literally, being the song playing.
Sure.
But in terms of the copyright of the trademarks of the song, for me to sell something as that's I don't know, Sound and Vision by David Bowie, I would be infringing on trademarks because his name would have been trademarked, and I'm passing off my own work through the success of another artist. I have to be very careful. So you have to be very careful with those things. So it's things like the words that you use, because to help promote my stuff, because I could say inspired by, but that was too vague because it's not inspired by. The patterns are literally the notes and the sounds of the music playing.
Yeah.
So it is still a bit of a grey area, but it's not really going to be a problem unless I'm just not careful. So, for example, the David Bowie project that I did with Harrods last year, I collaborated with Warner Music, Fire Pit Tech, and the David Bowie estate, and we actually signed a licensing deal with that project because I was promoting and selling the fabrics and the art piece as Let's Dance David Bowie, because it literally was that song in a visual form, in a visual representation, my representation of that song, but the patterns were still from that song. And that was the first time a licensing deal has ever been made with the music industry and weaving.
Wow, congratulations. That's really cool.
So it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Not to mention it was David Bowie. So, you know, and he wrote Sound and Vision, David Bowie. It's all about what if I could see sound back in the late 70s. So, you know, it was a really interesting project that I did. It was really frustrating at the time because as a creative person, I had to learn. I was communicating with a lawyer, so the words that he was using, I was like, I don't understand what you're saying, you know. So I had to like really learn fast, you know. But he was great. I mean, my lawyer that I worked with, he was very patient and he was very down to earth. So he kind of helped me a lot. And then I did an event with Warner Music UK, and because one of my biggest fears was that I'd be presenting my work, and then a publisher from a massive record company would come up to me and be like, "What are you doing? You can't do this. This is, you know, you need to pay royalties or this." And I didn't want to stand there on the stand being like, "Oh God, really?" Or I don't really know.
I didn't even know.
I want to know my stuff. Yeah, and then so I did an event with Warner Music, and the publishers and the director of legal of Warner Music were on the sort of dissecting my work, you know, asking me all these complicated questions. But because I'd invested that time with my lawyer, we wrote a legal document on it. I actually knew more than they did. So I was it was very much a conversation where I had to be very careful with how I was saying what I was saying, because I didn't want to sound arrogant, but I was able to, any question they asked me, I was able to turn it around in a way that, you know, this is actually an opportunity for the both of us because we could work together. Because I understand that for them, they're looking at new ways of making royalties.
Yeah.
Because streaming and all the things that royalties in music sales is depleting by the second. So they're now working with tech music companies now, thinking of new ways to get small royalties from new ideas with music through technology. So it was a pretty cool experience, actually.
That is
really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so cool. I never really thought about the trademark thing, but yeah, that must have been quite a process to go through. I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about, like, for example, the collaboration with Harrods that you did with the David Bowie song? Like, talk a little bit about, you know, what was that, like, you created the textile, and then what was it actually used for, and, like, how, and I know you did, I think maybe something similar with ABC Carpet and Home in New York City, or I don't know if it was different, but, like, give us a little visual of, like, what happens with the textiles. You create them and then they get turned into, like you said, I mean, home furnishings and perhaps garments, but can you talk a little bit about some of those projects and give us a better visual of what that looks like and what your role in the design process of the finished product may or may not be?
Yeah, sure. So Harrods, I've been working with Harrods for a few years, and they've been great supporters of mine, and my fabrics are in their fabric library on the third floor, and I sell them like pillows. And they heard that I was commissioned to weave Sound and Vision to commemorate David Bowie by Warner Music, and they were doing a project called Art Partners where they were looking at brands within the store, but they wanted these brands to be doing really cool and new, exciting things with in collaboration with something completely different. So they were working with like Lee Broom, who's quite a famous, I don't know if you know Lee Broom. He's like an artist that does, they look like they're porcelain inflatable balloon dogs, and he does them in all these bright colours.
He had a big installation in New York City. I'm very familiar now that you say what it is.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. So there was some really cool brands doing really cool things with artists, and they asked me, they said, would you be willing to do a collaboration with Warner Music and the David Bowie estate and create something specifically for Harrods, so that we, in commemoration of David Bowie. Yeah. So this is late for 2016. So I then went back to Warner Music and presented the idea, and they were amazing. Connected with the David Bowie estate, and it was approved. And then we had to choose a song, and we chose Let's Dance, because Let's Dance is one of my favourite David Bowie songs, but also I used to be a trained dancer, so we thought that would be a nice song to focus on because it represented me as well. And then I created the main piece, was an art piece. So it was a 2 meter, 10 centimeters long, and 70 centimeters wide. And now I'm speaking in meters and centimeters. I'm not sure what it is in inches, I'm afraid. But, and it was a framed art piece that was then in the window of Harrods on the Brompton Road. So they did like an exhibition in their window of all the different collaborative projects with the artists and brands. And it was the literal pattern of the song. It was half the song, wasn't the full song. And I pulled a project together for that and worked on the colours and the textures and yarns. They were pretty freeing with what I was allowed to do. So that was great, and I really loved that piece. And then off the back of that, we made a bespoke collection, limited edition collection of Let's Dance woven big pillows. They're like kind of art pieces, but they're pillows, and they would be an interpretation of a section of song. And then they were sold in the store specifically around this time. It was in April last year, April 2017 to May 2017. And then the fabric was sold 2 meter for interior design projects, but it was a limited edition run. So that was the Let's Dance project, really, and with David Bowie. And then with ABC, it was a little bit different, their project, because when I first met ABC, it was back in 2015 in New York, and we discovered each other at ICFF, at the International Contemporary Furniture Fair.
Yeah.
And when the buyer saw my work, she totally got it straight away. And when I went onto the website of ABC when I got home, I was like, oh my God, their brand values or their ethos around the brand of ABC is completely what I do, you know? So we kind of really connected on that level. And straight away, the buyer was saying, could you do the love frequency? And I was like, what's the love frequency? And she was like, you know, the 528 hertz, you know, when you meditate, and the frequency of 528 hertz is the frequency of love, and you attract more love into your life through this frequency. And I was like, wow, no. She said, one day we'll do this project, the love frequency. So they started buying my work for the store back in 2015, but in 2017, we started the Love Frequency project. So it was a commission project. And then they did a special event in store where they recorded the heartbeats of the customers going into the store, and they collected quite a few heartbeats, and then they gave the heartbeats to a sound engineer, a sound producer, and they made a song from them.
Wow.
So they gave, which was called I Am Love. So they then commissioned me to work with the Love Frequency and create one design, and then I worked with the I Am Love song and create another design. And it was quite a cool little special project, and they were launched for Valentine's Day.
Just this year of 2018, right?
2018. Oh, yeah, sorry, my mistake. Actually, the project started 2018, not 2017.
Well, it launched in February of 2018 for Valentine's, because I feel like I just saw it come through your Instagram. Yeah. That's so cool how that all came together. Really,
just.
Yeah, and it's just really cool when you like kind of dig into the real meaning behind it, and you follow the whole path of like where it really started, you know, with the collaboration of like capturing the customer heartbeats and then turning that into a song and then turning that into textile and then turning that into, you know, there's so many cool pieces of the process. I'd be curious, can you tell us a little bit about some of the ways that your textiles are used in the fashion space? Are you creating pieces, or are you collaborating, or are people buying your textiles and turning it into stuff?
So one of the challenges that I had to face starting out was whether I was going to focus on interiors or fashion, because I couldn't do the both, because the fashion production line would be completely different to an interiors one, and I was on my own at the start, sort of raising money and funds. So we decided to focus on the art interior based industry. However, the fabrics are an amazing fashion fabric, and I've trialed some fashion pieces just for myself, just to trial like what they look like as garments. But I actually haven't done anything professionally with fashion just yet. So what I'm wanting to do is do like a big. The first thing I'd want to do is do a collaboration with a fashion designer. I was in talks with a fashion designer in LA, but and actually that could still happen, that project, but it just hasn't manifested just yet.
Yeah.
But it's definitely on the agenda for sure.
That's really cool. And then you do sell, so you have the white label, which is where you sell small quantities of your textiles. Who do you see those going to? Are they going to people that are just wanting to make a one-off thing for themselves, or where do you see that really going?
So that's for the interior design market. So it's mainly trades that buy those.
Oh,
so
gotcha.
Interior designers who are doing projects, all different types of interior design projects. They've been bought for drapes. They've been used. One of my designs has been used for fabric walling. It's covered the interior of a room, which is based on music, and it's for the interior design trade. But I mean, anybody can buy it really, but it's mainly trade that are wanting to use it for their projects.
Yeah, gotcha. That's so cool. You guys have to really check out Nadia's website, because the audio version of this does not do it much justice. You've really got to see it in person, at least photographs. On that note, Nadia, can you share where everybody can find you online and see all the work that you're doing?
Sure. So it's my website is www.beatwoven.co.uk. Beatwoven, like the beat of the music, and woven, like woven textile.
Yes.
and it needs a little updating, because I've been so busy, but we're in the process of updating it. So, but it's still a good place to go for now. But maybe revisit again in a few months, because we'll be getting a whole new website.
Okay, awesome. But for now, there's some great photos, and you've got a couple of videos kind of showing some of the behind the scenes process of the weaving, which is very cool.
Yeah. But Instagram my Instagram page is a really good place to see what's going on more on a daily basis, and you can really get to see also a lot of the designs. So my handle for Instagram is @Beatwoven.
Awesome. I will link to both of those in the show notes. I would love to end with the question I ask everybody at the end of the interview. I'll rephrase it a little bit for you. I typically ask in a fashion sense. I'll ask in a textile sense. But what is one thing that people never ask you about working as a textile designer that you wish they would?
Probably... People always like to ask me sort of the generic questions, and so the sort of questions that trigger the really positive responses, but they never really seem to ask what it's actually like starting up a textiles brand, I suppose.
Yeah.
Because people always see on social media and Instagram how amazing it is and how wonderful it is, and it is on so many levels. But on the other side of things, people never really ask really what's going on behind the scenes, because I always like to compare it as like a swan, like when you see swans swimming on the water, and they look so graceful and beautiful from the surface, but they're paddling like crazy underneath. It's kind of a little bit like that, when people have been following you on Instagram and they're, oh my God, it's amazing, and you're doing so well, and you've really, been like working 18 hours a day for the last 7 days, hardly any sleep, and they never really ask you sort of what is actually, like, the amount of hard work that goes into what we do, I suppose.
Yeah.
So I would think that was one of the things that never really comes up.
Yeah. Well, you made the comment earlier that, like, you know, in university, you were very clearly a hard worker and driven, and your teachers there remembered that and thought of you. And I mean, it's pretty clear from the successes that you've had and what you've built that a lot of effort goes into it. But it's also really good to talk about that, because I think some people who maybe don't naturally have that type of a work ethic or drive, or, you know, I don't want to have that come off anyway negative, but I think, like you said, from the surface, it can look like, oh, look, she just made it happen. Poof, it magically happened. And you're like, no, not really.
Exactly. Exactly. Because I think some people think that it happens overnight and they don't really see the process. Like, you know, that it's actually taken me, and, you know, it took me how many years to take it to market, and then it's taken me another 4 years to get to this point. And there's been times where I've been like, I can't do this anymore. You know, there's been so many sacrifices and whatever. And I've actually had to do a lot of work that's not even related to textiles on myself, like self-development, making sure I'm reading the right books, I'm staying positive, and that I'm growing myself and evolving myself and being the best version of myself, to keep the business evolving and moving all the time and not giving up. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of other things that go on behind the scenes that people never know about, which I think is really, like, important to share with people, because when people know that, they know that if they're starting their own project or their own brand or their own, you know, being an entrepreneur, that when they come up against a struggle, they just think that, you know, oh my God, this is it. But actually, sometimes they're just challenges that once you get over it, just, you know, takes you to the next level, and just not to give up, I suppose.
Yeah, because there's going to be more of
them. Never gets mentioned. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. No, it's always good to talk about the realities of what does go on behind the scenes and how long things take. I mean, in my head, even when we first started this conversation, you say, oh, it started in 2008 as an experimental process at college, but then you had 2 years of working in the fashion industry, and then you had like a year of just talking to a lawyer, and then there's all these things that just take time, and even if on the surface it looks overnight, it never really is. So thank you for sharing that honest truth. And I think it's good for people out there to hear that, so that they know that, sometimes it takes time and there's hurdles and you get over them and you keep going. So, awesome. Thank you so much for chatting with me today, Nadia. It was really, really great to connect with you. And I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, lovely.
Thank you so much for listening to the Successful Fashion Designer podcast. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Again, if you haven't yet, take a second and share this episode or one of your other favorite episodes with someone you know who is working in the industry or wants to get into the industry. I hear so often from people how much they love the show and they wish they would have discovered it so long ago. So do them a favor and help them discover it sooner. I know they'll be grateful and I will be grateful. It's really the best thing you can do to help me out and help the show out and help out all those other people out there that want content and resources and help and support in making it in this industry. I really, really appreciate it, and I know they will too. As always, if you'd like to learn more about any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit the show notes at sfdnetwork.com/65. Thank you so much, and I will talk to you in the next Successful Fashion Designer podcast episode.
So I'm reading the right books, I'm staying positive, and that I'm growing myself and evolving myself and being the best version of myself, to keep the business evolving and moving all the time and not giving up. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of other things that go on behind the scenes that people never know about, which I think is really, like, important to share with people, because when people know that, they know that if they're starting their own project or their own brand or their own, you know, being an entrepreneur, that when they come up against a struggle, they just think that, you know, oh my God, this is it. But actually, sometimes they're just challenges that once you get over it, just, you know, takes you to the next level, and just not to give up, I suppose.
Yeah, because there's going to be more of
them. Never gets mentioned. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. No, it's always good to talk about the realities of what does go on behind the scenes and how long things take. I mean, in my head, even when we first started this conversation, you say, it started in 2008 as an experimental process at college, but then you had 2 years of working in the fashion industry, and then you had like a year of just talking to a lawyer, and then there's all these things that they do take time, and even if on the surface it looks overnight, it never really is. So thank you for sharing that honest truth. And I think it's good for people out there to hear that, so that they know that, sometimes it takes time and there's hurdles and you get over them and you keep going. So, yes. Awesome. Thank you so much for chatting with me today, Nadia. It was really, really great to connect with you. And I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, lovely.
Thank you so much for listening to the Successful Fashion Designer podcast. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Again, if you haven't yet, take a second and share this episode or one of your other favorite episodes with someone you know who is working in the industry or wants to get into the industry. I hear so often from people how much they love the show and they wish they would have discovered it so long ago. So do them a favor and help them discover it sooner. I know they'll be grateful and I will be grateful. It's really the best thing you can do to help me out and help the show out and help out all those other people out there that want content and resources and help and support in making it in this industry. I really, really appreciate it, and I know they will too. As always, if you'd like to learn more about any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit the show notes at sfdnetwork.com/65. Thank you so much, and I will talk to you in the next Successful Fashion Designer podcast episode.